You can see the beginning and the end of the town on a single straight road. The people that live there are housed, scattered across the hills and forests. When you come in, the locals either don't talk to you, or they're extremely friendly. This is a small town, places where there's nowhere to hide, and yet all the darkness is hidden about. If you're lucky, you might just stumble upon a small town with something terrible to hide. Enjoy these allegedly true and scary small town stories. If you have a scary story of your own, share it with us at darkstories.org. I'd love to hear some stories from where you work. Also, you can follow this show as a podcast, as well as my other podcast, Freaky Folklore, on Spotify, iTunes, and eeriecast.com. Links are in the description. Now, let's begin. Results of Bad Behavior, from Edgar A. This story is true as much as my memory allows. Some of the details may not be exact. This happened to me back in the early 80s, when I was around 21 or 22 years old. I worked at an oilfield construction company here in my hometown, which is in West Texas, a small town of 10,000 people. I won't give all the specifics. I want to protect my friends' anonymity. I worked with a guy we'll call Kevin, and we became good friends. I had a bad habit in those days of drinking way too much, but I've tried to change my ways because of what happened to me back then. We would work all day and then go home, Kevin to his house and me to mine. I would get cleaned up and then usually go get some booze, a bottle and a case of beer. Then we'd meet up at Kevin's house. Kevin lived in a very old home. Not sure when it was built, but it was old. We would spend our evenings drinking, talking, listening to music, and occasionally some other friends would show up for the festivities. Mostly it was just me and him, though, boozing it up until late at night. Kevin was a very talented and interesting guy. He would swig down beer and chase it with whiskey. The guy was a heavyweight when it came to drinking. He would play his guitar and sing. We'd have a great time. But I kept thinking in the back of my mind that my life was going nowhere. I knew that I should be doing something more with my life. Something more constructive. This is where the story starts to get weird. Somehow, I don't remember exactly how or where it came from, we ended up with a spirit board. I think someone must have left it there because I didn't bring it myself, and I don't think Kevin bought it. Yet, there it was, and we made the mistake of using it on several occasions. We'd ask it all kinds of questions. Sometimes, to our amazement, it would work. We would get intelligent answers. Other times it would do nothing or just go in circles. So we ended up putting it away, but it was too late. I believe we may have stirred something up. On one occasion I was there as usual, drinking with Kevin, and things had gotten quiet. He was strumming his guitar, and I was reading a magazine. All of a sudden, I got a strong smell of perfume. I asked Kevin if he could smell it. He said with a concerned look on his face, "Yeah, I smell it." We could both smell a woman's perfume in the room, but we were the only two there. The smell faded away and we both just kind of forgot. On another night, we were sitting in his living room talking, and I happened to look up at the light fixture in the middle of the ceiling. It was a heavy iron fixture, and I could have sworn all that time I thought it was black in color. But as I looked at it, it was most definitely green. I said to Kevin, "Hey Kev, don't look up, but tell me what color the light fixture is." He looked at me strangely and said, "Black." I said, "Okay, now look at it." He raised his head and looked at the light with an expression of confusion coming over his face. He was like, "What the? I thought it was black, it's green." On another occasion, after a night of some drinking, I told him I had to go, and we walked out onto his front porch together. I started walking toward my car, which was parked under an old dead tree in front of his house. I was saying goodbye, see you tomorrow, or something to that effect, and I happened to look up in the tree above my car. There was a huge bird. A blackbird with a yellow beak. I've lived in West Texas all my life, and I've never seen a bird like that before. It was making a noise similar to a crow. What the heck? I thought that it seemed very strange, but just continued to my car and drove the 10 blocks or so to my house. I had a digital clock in my room, and when I came in, I noticed it was 11:11. Thinking nothing of it, I went to bed and almost immediately fell asleep. I began to have terrible dreams. I was dreaming of another friend who had killed himself. I saw my friend in the dream, and he was sitting on a green velvet couch that was on a huge carpet, suspended in the air. The dead tree with the creepy bird was above my dead friend. And yes, in the dream he looked dead. He didn't say a word to me. He just looked at me like he was in a trance. I woke up, at least I think I was awake, and I could feel a hand on my left foot. I tried to move my foot, but I couldn't. I was petrified. I slowly got the courage to look at the foot of my bed. Nothing. Nobody was there. I got up and turned on the light. Nothing, no one. I don't think I got much sleep that night, but it doesn't end there. I continued all that summer to go to Kevin's house and drink with him. I would go home when I had had enough to drink, and when I'd arrive at my house and look at the clock, it would nearly always be 11:11. I never would look at Kevin's clock and think, oh, it's getting late, I better go. No, I'd randomly just leave when I felt like it. But more times than not, my clock would be 11:11. I started to think there was some significance in the numbers 11:11. Looking back on that time in my life, the only explanation I can come up with is that a higher power was trying to tell me that I wasn't living right. I wasn't being a very good person. I got into a lot of trouble as the years went by because of my drinking. Kevin moved on to some other town. He was very restless. He was a good friend of mine all those years ago. I hope his life turned out good. I quit drinking in October of 2000. My life is good now, and I don't have nearly as many problems as I did back then. I still, to this day, get the chills, and I'm very freaked out when I look at the clock, and it's 11:11. I feel as though this story has a positive message, though. Don't mess with the paranormal and don't drink. That was the message for me, anyway. Late Night Park Visit from PX5389. I'll start off by saying I live in a suburban setting in a small town. Unlike me, my friend had lived in a more rural section of the county at the time. This incident took place near my house. My friend's name is Ryan. He and I have certainly witnessed a whole bunch of wild crap throughout our time of being friends, and this experience was certainly memorable for its unnatural turnout. I met Ryan about a month before this occurrence happened. As funny as it sounds, we actually met through the twins we were dating. Who knew that our long-dead relationships with them sparked the friendship between two like-minded, adrenaline-junkie individuals that's lasted to this day? This happened back in the summer after freshman year of high school. As any other day of summer, we had made it our goal to make the most out of the time off from school. One late night during a summer sleepover, we figured, what better way to have a fun summer than to sneak out to the park at midnight? So that's exactly what we did. I live in a small neighborhood which connects to the village I live in. This park is in a relatively desolate area of the village, so there isn't much foot traffic going through that area, especially at night. Something about sneaking out just made each of us really excited, and we could hardly contain ourselves. We figured we'd have the opportunity to mess with a couple having fun in their car, or better yet, find some shady people to stalk just for the heck of it. Don't ask me why we thought this was a good idea. The only reason I have is moronic teenager behavior. I know at least one of you felt the same way we did at one point in your lives. Looking back, it was dumb. But then again, if we didn't do something stupid like this, we would have no good stories to share. Anyway, we were hanging in my basement. My parents had recently had it finished, and one of the safety requirements was an escape latch. To us, that escape latch was our way of getting out and not being caught. It worked perfectly, and I've resorted to using it ever since when needed. Before we left, I made sure we brought a basketball along, because I knew that during the summer the park hosted a camp, and they put up a basketball hoop for campers to use. As we climbed out of my basement, we were exposed to the hot night air. One problem we had were the mosquitoes. The dang suckers were everywhere we walked. As we walked onto the sidewalk, we started to have a conversation along the lines of, "Wait until the twins hear what we did tonight." At the time, we thought we were savages, but now I realize we were just impulsive teenagers that were way over their heads. Before I continue, it's crucial that I give you a good idea of how the park looks. There's a traditionally paved road that leads to the parking lot, all the way on the other side of the park. We, however, had come through the neighborhood, which has a rough dirt path that we would usually bike on during the day. As we walked across this dirt path, there were baseball fields on either sides of us, with their dugouts empty. We continued to walk, wary of our surroundings, until we made our way to the dimly lit pavilion. Next to the pavilion was one area with playground equipment. This was often referred to as the little kids area. The parking lot connected to the pavilion and this playground. About a quarter mile down the parking lot was the big kids area, with more complex equipment. This area was located much closer to the entrance of the park. The big kids area connected to the parking lot, and a gigantic soccer field, which stretched all the way to where the pavilion was located. Seeing this field in its uninhabited state put both of us in a feeling of unease. We made jokes about something possibly being out there watching us from the field. Obviously, they were just jokes, though. We had actually not seen anything. But saying we did scared the heck out of each of us, nonetheless. For now, we were just sitting in the pavilion, listening to music and talking about future plans with our girls. Those were certainly some nostalgic times. I couldn't help but look back towards the field every so often, just out of paranoia that someone or something might be out there. Nothing ever showed. After about an hour of just chilling, we figured we would make our way down to the basketball court. To be as descriptive as possible, we made our way across the main parking lot area down to where the big kid area of the park was. Instead of going straight, which would lead to the exit of the park, we made a right to the parking lot, which exposed a whole other area of unused parking spaces. This extended about a half mile down. All the way at the bottom of the parking lot was the basketball hoop, along with dense forest which surrounds the area of the sector of the parking lot. Now, before we made our way completely down, I stopped and I told my friend to stand still. A faint car outline was visible in the furthest corner of the area. This instantly caused us to become suspicious. The car was black, which only made it blend in more with the night. What made us more curious was the fact that the outline was not that of a police car. Instead of turning back like normal people, we continued on our merry way right down to the basketball hoop. I guess we were just testing this person to see what they would do. There's that typical untouchable macho kid stereotype again. Their car was completely off, and had been for the past hour, which we assumed because no one had driven into the park while we were there. At first, I figured they must be lovers, but no. There was no one in the passenger seat, and the only light illuminating from within the car now seemed to be that of a phone screen. This hoop was a few yards away from the car, which we thought was a safe distance away. We decided if anything went south, we would book it back to the pavilion by cutting through the field, which we really didn't want to do, but if it came down to it, we'd have to. We started to play some basketball for a few minutes, but as time went by, we only became more unsettled. The fact that this person was sitting in their car unbothered by us made us each on edge. Instead of shooting around, we had begun to occasionally dribble the ball, while just staring at the car in our peripheral vision. During an interval of my friend dribbling the ball, I could swear I heard the evermost slight crack of the car driver's side door opening. I told my friend to quit it, and we each stared at the car waiting for something to happen. We were silent. A few moments passed, and at this point nothing happened. Now sort of teed off that this guy was ruining our time, I yelled some profanities his way, and foolishly threatened to call the police, which I was quite sure he heard. Right after I finished, the car engine came to life, and the car began to violently back out of the spot it was parked in. It was truly disturbing how a night so silent had turned into an episode of screeching tires and burning rubber. As soon as this guy began to back out, that's when me and my friend booked it. We ran up the little hill that led to the field and hopped the fence. Screw whatever imaginary cryptid could be stalking us in the field. Right now, the main priority was to get away from this lunatic in their car. As we made our way through the field, we saw the car driving full speed right out of the parking lot and out of the park. We were left in the confusion, not even knowing what to think. So many questions had been running through my mind. Had that guy just tried to run us over? Why had he been in such a hurry to leave? What if we hadn't run to the soccer field in time? What if I hadn't noticed him open the door ever so slightly? All these questions have remained unanswered to this day. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. This wasn't even the most freakish part of the night. That is yet to come. As we had made our way back to the pavilion, we sat down on one of the benches and sat in complete silence for a few minutes, contemplating what just happened. After just sitting there for a few minutes, we started to just talk again, watching the entrance to the park, just in case anyone drove in. We sat there for a decent amount of time until Ryan suddenly whispered to me, "Dude, check it. Is that someone on the swings?" My stomach sank. On the other side of the park, where the big kid area was, we saw a dark figure. We watched closely as the silhouette went up and down. We fell silent, studying what was right in front of us. What really spooked me was the distant yet familiar sound of that rusty chain swinging slowly back and forth. I got goosebumps as I picked up on the sound. How could someone have gotten there without us noticing, especially if they had not come through the neighborhood entrance or road entrance? This wasn't one of those cliches where as soon as you notice the thing, it stops doing whatever it's doing and looks you dead in the eye and comes towards you. No. Instead, my friend decided to yell out to them. That's right. He literally said, "Hey, you want to play some basketball?" Whoever we were looking at stopped swinging and looked in our general direction. I was on the verge of punching Ryan so hard in the mouth for what he just said. I told him, "Dude, what the heck? What if he runs towards us?" He simply replied, "Don't worry, bro. He's outnumbered, and we have pocket knives." As I recall that line now, I cringe so hard, fully understanding what clowns we were. It's honestly comical to a certain degree when you take out the potentially life-threatening dude that was only a sprinting distance away from us. But no, that figure didn't advance towards us. They didn't make a sound. All they did was get up off the swing and head into the small bathroom facility that was located right next to the park area. They were hooded, and we only saw the back of them as they went in. Judging by stature, this person looked tall and lanky. Me and my friend were officially freaked out, but we stood there in anticipation for a few minutes just waiting. 10 minutes passed, and we had been staring right at the door the person had entered, waiting for the door to open again. A few minutes after that, the door swung open. The same individual came out, but they faced us this time. We were able to distinguish their face. Their eyes were enormous, and their hair was a wild mess across their face and beneath their hood. At first, I was confused and thought we were looking at a complete freak. I was so disturbed. I looked down at the mouth and it was twisted in this horrific, static grimace. That's when I realized it must have been a mask. Thinking about it now, it reminded me very much of that Momo character that was hyped up a few years back. They gave a quick wave in our direction and motioned us to follow. It was a quick glance I got because as soon as this person came out of the bathroom, they swung to their side and walked towards the end of the parking lot, where the basketball hoop was. To give a better image of this parking lot, it was forked into two areas. If you were coming from the park road entrance, you could either go straight towards the pavilion or take a left and go down into the bigger parking lot which extended to where the basketball hoop was, closely followed by the tree line. My friend and I stood and watched as this figure continued their way, not looking back at us. We weren't sure of what to do. We just sat there, stunned. Suddenly, out of nowhere, the figure had broken into a full-on sprint heading right into the woods. That's when we noticed the headlight beams appearing at the entrance of the park. We saw the grill and realized it was a police officer. He continued driving towards us. As opposed to most people, we were actually relieved to see him come our way. He got out of his car and in a stern voice asked us what we were doing out at this hour. We replied, just hanging out. The officer told us it would be best if we went home, that if he catches us here again at this time, he would escort us home himself. He was stern yet considerate, and we appreciated that. After he said this, I asked if he had seen that person running into the woods on his way into the park. He replied no, and asked us if we were under the influence, clearly skeptical. We quickly said no and asked if there were any security cameras in the park. He said, "Yeah, that's how I knew you were here." Then it hit me there were other security cameras that had been scattered throughout the park. I asked if any of them were recording, to which he responded, "Only one that's working right now is the one located in the pavilion." This disappointed us greatly and left us with a feeling of dread. He asked us a few more questions, then sent us on our way, making sure we left the park. Once we'd gotten back to my house, we had snuck back in through the basement escape hatch. We discussed what happened, both of us shaken. The following day, we walked back to the park at noon, when there were other people around. We went over to the bathroom that had been used by that person the other night. Nothing seemed wrong, but on our way out, Ryan caught a glimpse of the garbage can and said, "Hold up." Curious, I turned around and we both looked. In the garbage was that mask the person had used, or at least what used to be the mask. It appeared to have been cut up and ripped apart with something. After that, we left in a hurry. Ever since that day, we haven't really went to the park, period. It just sketched us out too much and we didn't want anything to do with it. Sure, it's a crazy memory to share, but honestly, retelling the story in its entirety has given me goosebumps and a feeling of anxiety, traveling back in my mind to the night this happened, knowing how dangerous it could have been. Your typical questions had swarmed into my mind after the whole ordeal. Was the car in the parking lot earlier connected to the person? Why was that person alone on the playground at that time? Most bizarre of all, why did he wear a mask? Most chilling of all, had that person been watching us the whole time we were there? These questions remain unanswered, and I still obsess over them to this day occasionally. Living in a small town like ours, this certainly wasn't ordinary. Our town in general is safe, and nothing majorly bad has happened in the years I've lived here. Maybe it was some sort of weird prank, but that couldn't explain it considering the fact that these people had no idea we were coming. If anyone has suggestions, I'd love your input. This has honestly stumped me. It would probably ease the intense curiosity I found myself in after remembering this incident once again. Even though this was seriously messed up, it hasn't been the scariest thing that's ever happened to me, but it certainly was eerie and unexplainable. Nowadays, I make an effort to steer clear of any obvious possible trouble. Being young at the time, I was daring, and I guess that's what led to my naive personality. Town Demon, from Meagan. I've lived in the countryside my whole childhood life, up to the age of 18. Before it was just fields and trees, it used to be a small, thriving town called Gladwin in the early 1900s, until a train derailed and burned the town to the ground. It was never rebuilt, and sadly there were fatalities. I'm 26 now, and I still clearly remember a few things that happened in our house. My earliest memory was when I was around 5 years old. My sister was 8. To this day, she still claims this true, and she was the good child in the family. My mother, sister, and I fell asleep in the living room from watching movies. The next thing I remember, my sister was waking us up in the middle of the night, explaining that she got up because she had to use the restroom, and a green skeletal apparition told her no. My mom brushed it off, saying she's just making it up, trying to scare me. I always felt uneasy in my bedroom. I felt as if I was being watched often, especially at night. The first time something happened to me, I woke up. Now, my Barbie house I had was on top of my Barbies because I knocked it over earlier that night. I awoke to the sound of my Barbie house squeaking from moving. I had a nightlight in my bedroom, so I looked down from my bed, and I literally saw my dollhouse moving. Like the Barbies underneath were moving the dollhouse. I bolted out of my room straight to my parents. My mom said I was just seeing things. It was just my imagination. You know, what parents usually say to try and calm their kids down. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. I slept in the living room for 3 years after that. When my sister moved out of the house, I switched to her bedroom, which was smaller but felt more pure. I never had an uneasy feeling in her room. I stayed in that bedroom until I moved out of the house. At the age of 19 or 20, my sister and I were visiting our parents. Around 11 p.m., we heard 2 bangs on the side of our house. The next day, we found my grandmother deceased in her home. We think it was her spirit saying goodbye. My grandparents lived like 15 yards from my parents. I feel sorry for my mother, because she also found my grandfather's body years before that. Horseshoe Trail, from Edgar C. Before I begin, I want to let you know I'm not Native American. My name is Austin, and this experience happened to me when I was 14. My friend Travis invited me to go visit his uncle's house in Sedona, Arizona, for 2 weeks. It's a small town with a population of a little over 10,000. We left the school day ended. We soon arrived, and mark my words, Sedona is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. The red mountains and red rocks are breathtaking. On the 3rd day, Travis's uncle wanted to know if we wanted to go hiking on one of the mountain trails. We said yes, and we were excited. It was very hot out, so we decided to go around 6 p.m. It was about a 10-minute drive, but we ended up making it there around 6:20. There were multiple trails, but we went on one called Horseshoe Trail because Travis's uncle, let's call him Scott, said there was a lot of wildlife on the trail. It was a 4-mile hike, and it wasn't going to get dark anytime soon, so we weren't worrying, and we did see a lot of wildlife. About 2 miles into the hike, Travis said he thought something was watching us. I said nothing's watching us, and if there really is something, it's probably a bird. We got to the 3-mile checkpoint when suddenly the noise stopped. No animals were making noise. We stopped to wonder what was happening until we heard something slowly walk towards us. I began to smell something dead and disgusting. Scott noticed it too, and he gave a look like something bad was about to happen. He told us in a trembling voice, "We have to get out of here, quickly." We ran down the hill and into the car. When we got home, we asked Scott what happened, but he didn't answer. So we went to bed. A couple of hours later, I was awakened to the same smell. I got up and woke Travis. We then heard bones cracking and something growling. It seemed to be coming outside the window.
Travis, it is your uncle, Scott. Come outside. I need you.
That wasn't his uncle. We ran to Scott's room, and sure enough, there he was. We woke him. Scott ran outside with a pistol and shot after whatever that was, but none of us really knew. I will always remember what happened, but I'm still confused as to what that was.